All right, good afternoon. And so let me first show you a 2-minute video that is going to take you to Togo, to the coast, and you will see what is going on.
Avant, il y avait une belle plage, bordée par les cocotiers, bel et bien sablonnée aussi. Il y avait un aspect bien touristique. Les beaux jours sont passés. Ce que vous voyez, c'est un Mopu. C'était au milieu de la maison. Alors, la mer a pris une partie de la maison et entame le reste. Bientôt, il va déraciner le puits et puis le fait tomber et va attaquer la maison.
All along West Africa's coast, rising seas, heavy flooding and erosion are destroying dozens of villages, displacing thousands of families and taking away people's homes and jobs. A third of West Africa's people live in coastal areas, and their lives are increasingly threatened by the impact of climate change. In fact, about 10 meters of coastline is lost every year.
Je n'ai plus de terrain, je n'ai rien. On vivait de la pêche. L'érosion a fait qu'il y a des roches maintenant dans la mer. C'est pas comme la pêche qu'on faisait avant.
Nearly half of West Africa's GDP comes from coastal activities. Saving the coastline is crucial for the region's economy and its people. The World Bank and partners created WACA, the West Africa Coastal Areas Management Program, to respond to this crisis. The financing needs are immense. While funds have already been raised, a new investment platform aims to crowd in an additional $2 billion.
Naturally, you are not doing mi na puta mi tona kala mi kan to ba fo ba le wole ke kwa apudu nature kankan kara pudu nature e dore gbalu.
WACA's actions will transform lives, bring back jobs, and build the resilience of coastal communities.
All right. So Mr. and Mrs. Ifowe, the brother and sister you just saw in this video, are not the only ones to be living on the edge. There's 120 million people living in coastal areas in West Africa, and they're threatened by coastal erosion and flooding pretty much on a daily basis. Aerial photography and maps, and now also remote sensing images, give us an idea of how much land has already been lost. Large swaths of land, of coast, have basically disappeared, and with them houses, roads, factories. In places, the coast erodes by more than 20 meters per year, even more than what you saw in the video. So it's hard to imagine, but when you stand on the beach in West Africa and you look out to sea, it's hard to imagine that several lost cities of Atlantis litter the bottom of the ocean. And, you know, this destruction, unfortunately, is showing no sign of abating. Every day you have more houses crumbling into the ocean. That water well that you saw, this gentleman who sits there, it's now gone, and their house may be gone soon too. Unfortunately, climate change makes matters even worse, right? With sea level rise and storm surges. And the economic losses are, of course, staggering. Mauritania and Togo have lost, around 2% each of their GDP in a single year, 2013, 2014. And the social costs are also huge. In Senegal, Saint-Louis, which is a World Heritage Site, that city is going to have to relocate thousands of people in the next few years. And yet, do you know this problem? No, this problem is actually not very well known to the international climate community. So what we did, we took it to the One Planet Summit in Paris last December. We showed this video to about 3,000 people on a gigantic screen. The president of France was there, many heads of state were there, and an international response has started because things can change for the better, and we need this community to join the effort. You want to? Just... So look at the difference. Do you know where this is? It's not Miami, it's not Los Angeles, it is not Malaga, it is not Dubai, it is Durban, another African city, which is dealing, with similar coastal challenges. In fact, most coastal cities around the world face similar challenges, and some do better than others. Those that are doing better share some of the following features. They have better coastal zoning plans. They have respected setbacks between buildings and the sea. They have prohibited sand mining from the beaches and rivers. They mitigate the impact of ports by moving sand from where it accumulates to where it erodes. They have preserved and restored mangroves and dunes to buffer the coast against the sea. And they do a number of other things. So West African countries can do this also. At COP21, the World Bank introduced the West Africa Coastal Areas Management Program. We call it WACA. And WACA started with a period of technical assistance, but just last month, a first investment project worth $220 million was approved for 6 countries: Mauritania, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire. We have 3 representatives of the government of Côte d'Ivoire here: Togo, Benin, and Sao Tome and Principe. The resources come from the World Bank's own fund for the poorest countries, IDA, the Global Environment Facility, the Nordic Development Fund, the French Development Agency, and the Global French Fund for the Environment. But of course we know that this is not nearly enough. And this is why we're setting up a new investment platform, which I'm presenting to you today, and it has 3 goals. The first goal is to accelerate the transfer of global knowledge and expertise on coastal resilience to West Africa. Second, it will crowd in finance from the public and private sectors. And third, it will foster cooperation among West African countries, because we know that this problem is too big for any single country to deal with on its own. So this WACA platform, we hope, will be launched later this year at a location to be revealed soon. We are looking for 2 types of partners. We're looking for both financial and knowledge partners. A number of European countries and organizations, Arab funds and global funds have already expressed interest in co-financing WACA. We've set, as you saw, an initial target of $2 billion. But knowledge is also crucial. In fact, there's lots of countries around the world that are dealing with similar issues, and so we want to make this knowledge and expertise available to West Africa. Now, the West African governments must play their part in setting and enforcing laws and regulations. That is their responsibility, and it's a necessary condition. But then the private sector can innovate and invest in climate-smarter ways. And the platform will, in fact, provide incentives for such innovation. The sectors directly involved include roads, ports, urban development, tourism, construction, and of course, banking, insurance, and consulting. And so I don't know how many private sector people there are here, but there are clearly significant opportunities to do well by doing good. And so I invite all these sectors to become involved in the WACA platform to start planning the future of the West African coast. And so let me conclude and leave you with this image. The image of a coast that is both more prosperous and more resilient. And I want you to think about the role you can play in turning this vision into reality alongside the World Bank and many others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benoit. So now we will start by opening up to the floor, but maybe just to kick off the conversation, Benoit, are there already any governments or private sector companies that have expressed interest? And if so, how?
Yes, so we are in discussions with a number of countries, organizations, funds. There are a few, the European Union, the French Development Agency. In fact, in Saint-Louis in Senegal, in February, the President of Senegal, the President of France, and the President of the World Bank Group agreed to emergency support. And that was very much accelerated by the announcement of this platform in Paris. We're now in discussions with Spain, with the Green Climate Fund. So there's quite a number of, at the moment, public and international organizations that are interested. But we very much hope, and in fact we have started engaging the private sector about their role. There are clearly investment opportunities. When you shift your vision from Togo to Durban, you realize this capital that is there, that is not capital that is going to be created by the public sector. It's mostly private money. So when is this private money going to be invested in Abidjan, in Cotonou, in Lomé, and other places? So I think that if the government sets the enabling framework, the private sector will come, because there's an enormous need for investment and reinvestment.
Okay. Questions from the floor, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Benoit. Paola Agostini from the World Bank. 2 questions. One, the use of technology, disruptive technologies. For example, we work a lot of mangroves, and I just met a company that does planting through drones in mangroves and wetlands. Is that something that you are foreseeing as useful for the WACA platform? And the second question is, we just heard a very interesting example from Vietnam, where the private sector is really working in sustaining the mangrove forest through, a company that is investing in shrimps that comes from sustainable mangrove. Is this something that can work in the WACA countries? Thank you.
So there are not many shrimp farms along the West African coast, as far as I know, but there are lots of mangroves, and they're being converted to, hard infrastructure. So as part of the WACA platform, and in fact already as part of the first investment project, there will be quite a bit of mangrove rehabilitation. Not in all the countries, it depends, but quite a few countries do have mangroves. I don't think they're going to plant the mangroves using drones, but they are using drones to do surveys. In fact, the multi-sector investment plan that was done for Côte d'Ivoire, the city of Grand Laou, was done based on drone aerial, surveys. So clearly, we must do a lot of that and use the technology that is available.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor?
I will say, though, a little story on this disruptive technology. If you use remote sensing images, you can go back about 30 years in time to see how the coast has evolved. But what's really interesting is to get your hand on the old technology, which is the aerial maps that were drawn by the colonial powers, and even PhD students from universities, and you see how much has been lost, and it's staggering. And the remote sensing images do not go back far enough in time to figure this out. So we must use the disruptive and the convention information technology to really appreciate the extent of the destruction.
Benoit, I have another question for you. So it sounds like the platform is already attracting quite a significant amount of concessional finance and kind of public finance to help fund. It sounds like this is really an opportunity to partner with the private sector. What would be the rationale for a private company in infrastructure or in tourism to partner with WACA?
Well, I mean, first of all, they need to ensure their survival. If you're a hotel manager or owner on the coast, you have to consider that, your hotel may be lost in the coming, 10 or 15 years, depending on how close you are to the beach and how fast the erosion is progressing. So, there's a survival instinct that needs to kick in there. Then there is the potential, to turn this Togolese coast that you saw in the first slide to this. And, that is a massive amount of money, right? You go from crumbling concrete to hotels that are standing and attracting, thousands, hundreds of thousands of tourists. So the vision is clearly there. But the question is, how secure the private sector feels that, in investing right away. So I think there's a role for the public sector in creating this framework, and then the private sector will come. The private sector, by the way, also has responsibility. When ports cause erosion and displace people, that is an externality that sooner rather than later, and hopefully soon, is going to be internalized. It is quite unacceptable that you have a lot of sand accumulating on one side of the port infrastructure, and then on the other, very vulnerable communities that are, underwater. Their houses are destroyed, they have to move, and they have no support for doing so. So I think there are opportunities for profit-making investments in the long term for the private sector, but there's also responsibilities that are there and that the government has to enforce.
Great. Any more questions from the floor? I'm sure it's all deep inside. Just raise your hand. Okay. Thank you, Benoit. Here's a question.
Thank you. AJ Glauber, also from the World Bank, although working in East Asia, not in West Africa. Could you talk a bit, it seems this is like a fantastic vision and clearly something that really has a useful set of outcomes when delivered, but also complicated to bring so many partners together, even at the government side, right? You mentioned there are 7 countries, is that what you said? So 7 countries, different visions, different institutions, different incentives, different political economy, et cetera, et cetera. Can you speak a bit about what kind of a platform do you put in place that actually brings together those partners, and how do you help to create a sort of a shared set vision that works across that broad region, please?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and I'm sure our friends from Côte d'Ivoire are thinking hard about that. But first of all, there is already a shared vision that was built through this first investment project. The technical assistance phase started 4 years ago, and I think the 6 countries have realized that they have to gain from working together. Because what one does, by the way, impacts the one next door. And so if you want to protect yourself, you have to think about the impact that you create on the country downdrift, right, downstream, and you have to think of what the country upstream from you is doing that is going to job more difficult. So I think, there is that sense, and there are a couple of regional organizations whose mandate it is to actually promote this cooperation. But nevertheless, it's very true that it's going to be a complicated thing to manage that platform. However, we'll keep it very light. And so we'll make it attractive to countries. It's going to be a bunch of fora, like the World Economic Forum, if you like. It's not going to be one very strict, rigid, structure. It's going to be agile, and it's going to respond to the need. So if Côte d'Ivoire receives a certain amount in support from the World Bank, but it needs 10 times that amount, it will be able to come to the platform and expose its needs, and hopefully among the partners, the financial partners that are there, there'll be 1, 2, or 3 who'll be able to pick up and in co-financing ways, support Côte d'Ivoire. So the World Bank is not requesting that other donors place their money with us. We're in fact encouraging joint or parallel financing so that all the development agencies can deploy their structures and their personnel to make that happen. So it can be a new platform, very flexible.
Thank you.